I think as we grow older, I think there is this need to connect to your roots somewhere. Like Ponniyin Selvan, Kalki. I think there is a natural curiosity for people to know more about it.
Yeah.
And I can't read Tamil, and it's a 1,000-page book. How do I access it?
Yeah.
That is where audiobooks are fantastic, I would say. I hardly cry in my real life, but I cry so well in audio. So people will think that I'm really crying, but I would only be, voice acting.
Okay.
But I cannot laugh. I laugh a lot in my real life, but I cannot laugh easily while recording. So it's very strange how the real character me becomes a different character inside the studio booth. One person said his mom lost her eyesight to cancer, but she was a voracious reader in her prime days, and he wrote an email saying, my mom has started reading again because of you. And that email is priceless. We are all seeking something like this in our professional lives to feel that we've touched on other person's life in a meaningful way.
Some stories are read, some are heard, and some are felt across generations. On this episode of Expressions, we sat down with Deepika Arun, educator, storyteller, and the voice behind many Tamil audiobooks like Ponniyin Selvan, Sivagamin Sabadam, and many more that have brought literature alive for children, parents, and grandparents alike, from classrooms to headphones. Her journey is a beautiful reminder of the power of stories when they are told with heart.
Hi, today I have a very interesting guest with me. Her name is Deepika Arun and she does some innovative work on audiobooks. Let's get to know her more. Hi Deepika, thank you for coming to Expressions.
Hi Neha, thank you for considering me to be a part of your show.
I did some research. I really found it very interesting how you work with, especially choosing Tamil as a medium, which is very different. I mean, people have a lot of audio English books, but
yes.
So, coming back to your background, you trained as a bioengineer and worked at TCS, a very secure, respected path. When was that moment that you realized that this is really not what I should be doing? And what gave you the courage to just walk away from it?
I think the work that I was doing at TCS was not interesting or challenging. I mean, I sort of knew that it's going to be like that when I got placed, but did not expect it to be this boring.
Yeah.
And that's when I was, I think, looking for a change. And I thought becoming a teacher would be a good career change at that point in time. But I also decided that, okay, if I become a teacher, then I have to take a considerable pay cut. Like, as you said, it's a very safe, stable path. And the pay cut was very jarring, if I must say. It was 1/4 of what I was getting at TCS. And that was like the higher slabs. Some schools offered me 5K a month back then, and it was quite scary to shift that gear. But I think I've always been a teacher at heart. Every moment inside the classroom has always been very special. So I think the transition per se was quite natural, if I can say that.
But it was a really bold move. I mean, just to...
I think I should not take so much credit for that because the family also played a very important role.
Sure.
See, if we had, that was just when I had married. It was 1 year into my marriage. And if my husband and I had taken a decision that, okay, we'll buy a home, we'll buy a car, get into the whole EMI loop, then it's very difficult for me to scale down in terms of the pay, right? Yeah. But we decided that it's okay, we'll do this. And my in-laws, my parents, everybody was very supportive. They didn't ask me like, are you mad? To give away such a lucrative paycheck and move to something like this. So I think a lot of credit goes to them because they did not sow that seed of doubt in me. Yeah. So I could sort of boldly pivot into the new career. Yeah.
And you were always the storyteller in your grandmother's house?
Yes, yes.
So looking back, do you feel your adult success was already hiding inside your childhood?
I don't think so. I think it was just a few of us cousins meeting, and I think they were fascinated by the stories that I used to read and I used to tell them. They were smaller cousins, right? So I used to read Vikram Betal and the likes, and I used to have a certain tone of narrating it to make it interesting, I think. So, I mean, it's very interesting that I forgot that I used to do it till my cousin, a few years back, he said, you were always a storyteller. And I was like, was it? So I don't think I foresaw anything, or
Just
I didn't even
happened.
remember, to be
Yeah.
honest.
So you've had people tell you that their grandmothers who can no longer read now listen to your stories.
Yes.
That must be a really good feel, right?
Yes, it's very heartwarming to
Yeah.
get such messages.
Yeah.
One person said, from London, he's an oncologist, and his mom lost her eyesight to cancer. But she was a voracious reader in her prime days, and he wrote an email saying, "My mom has started reading again because of you." And I mean, that email is priceless.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
we are all seeking something like this in our professional lives,
Yeah.
to feel that we've touched another person's life in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
So these are very precious. I don't have words to
Yeah, absolutely.
explain how I feel. Yeah.
Anything else that comes to your mind?
Quite a few messages come now and then. A person from Dubai said he lost his mom quite early in his life. His mom used to tell stories in Tamil, and he wrote a message saying, "You somehow brought my mom back through Tamil Annai." I think in Tamil Nadu there is a temple for Tamil Annai. Like
Okay.
Tamil is celebrated as a mother.
Okay.
So he said, "Tamil Annai is back to me through you," and that's very
Touching too.
yeah. And another person from Canada, he came and met me. He said he lost his mother as well very recently, and somehow my stories helped him cross that grief. I don't know if I mean I get very emotional talking about this,
Yeah.
because I do not really know if I can take the credit per se.
Yeah.
But I'm really grateful that I've been able to
Touch
touch lives in some sense. Yeah.
positively, yeah. So pardon my Tamil, but from Jula to Chittu Kuruvi
Yes.
to Punyan Selvan card game.
Yes.
So you keep turning stories into experiences. And what do you think why do you think storytelling is such a powerful way to learn, even beyond textbooks, I would say?
Didn't we all learn from stories first?
Yeah.
Like, think about it in your childhood. I'm sure when your mom was trying to feed you, she must have told you some random story, or your grandparents, when you visit them, they must have shared some random anecdote from their life in the form
Yeah.
of a story. I think
Yeah.
we all have grown up with stories. That is the first medium with which I think we are introduced to new worlds, new lives, new concepts. So I think storytelling is a very integral part of us, and to sort of use that in different ways is what I'm trying to do. So I think it's a no-brainer that storytelling is the medium for all of us. I mean, you are a storyteller through this podcast. You are telling stories of different people. So if we look at it, we are all storytellers in our own ways. So storytelling is very important
Yeah.
in every aspect of life, I think.
Yeah. No, but tell us more about this Jula and how's your journey been through all of this?
Okay, I keep saying that I'm like a monkey jumping between one career to another. So what started as TCS, and then I became a teacher, and then I started a digital marketing and branding company with my brother. And then while I was doing that, I started Jula. The idea of Jula is to help children stay away from screens.
Yeah.
And now there's a lot of talk about this, right? The whole impact of screens and everything. But back when I started, this was almost 10 years back. It was not as prevalent as today to talk about impact of screen time in children's brains, etc. But I noticed that when I was teacher in the school that I worked in, I could notice the impact that screens had on children
Yeah.
even back then.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to create a space where children can be children, stay away from gadgets, learn essential socio-emotional skills. I think that is
Very important.
very important, and
Yeah.
I'm sure as a mother you must notice, right?
Yeah.
Today if you let 10 children as a group sit somewhere, they will not start playing.
Yeah.
They will randomly wait for somebody to give them some instruction. Like, think about our childhood, right? We used to go to the street, make friends, play. That's not happening naturally today.
Yeah.
I mean, there are many reasons, but I also feel screens are a very important part of this shift. So that is how Jula was born. And I was running it for almost 4 years. We have a cozy library with about 2,000 books. I love board games, and we had a small board game room with about 200 games. And there would be one structured activity where children would learn essential life skills, socio-emotional skills. So that's the idea of Jula, and then COVID happened. So I had no choice but shut down the center. I think that was a very difficult decision to make. Peak lockdown, I had to, it was a rented space, so I had to shut down the entire thing. I had to repaint the walls. I had to shift everything to my home and dump it in whatever wardrobe and attic, and wherever there was space, I dumped all the books and board games and everything. And I waited till 2024 to sort of reopen. So it was quite painful for me to do that. But now I think the need for children to stay away from screens, especially in the younger age, like maybe till 10, I think it's very imperative. But today, schools have also started a lot of online classes, and they are sending worksheets on WhatsApp. So children cannot stay away from screens. So how do we sort of find a balance? That's what Jula is about. And when we closed Jula during COVID, I really missed talking to children and spending time with children. That is when the idea of Chittukuruvi podcast was born. What if I could tell stories, but children can still stay away from screens? Because audio, that is the amazing thing. You just have to listen. You don't have to watch something. So the parent can also play and have the phone with them, and it could play in some Bluetooth speaker somewhere, and they know that the child is listening to safe content. That is how Chittukuruvi podcast, the idea was born. And I enjoy narrating stories on Chittukuruvi podcast, especially I think the conceptualization of the stories. It's not some random moral of the story kind of stories, because I think children today are very smart.
Yeah.
So how do I not underestimate their intelligence, but also ask questions that would enable them to think and also go back to the parents and have a conversation about the topic that is spoken about. We've recently finished a series called An Alternate End to Panchatantra Stories. I'm sure you've read a lot of Panchatantra stories. I mean, do children need so much tantra? Tantra means like cunningness and how do I sort of win? How do I fool somebody? That is what Panchatantra stories are all about. But children don't need that. Children are born with that. They're master manipulators. Like, look at 1.5-year-old child. Nobody teaches that child manipulation, but child can manipulate very well. But why do we need more tantra to that? So we had a twist to the Panchatantra stories where we would end the same story with an act of kindness, with an act of remorse, you know. So I think that's what we're trying to do with Chittukuruvi podcast. Now we've started a series where I combine what I do at Jula, the emotional intelligence part is now becoming stories on Chittukuruvi podcast. So I think whatever I do has some sort of link. Yeah.
Very nice, very wonderful.
Thank you.
You've already been a huge Harry Potter fan.
Yes.
Yet Stephen Fry's audiobook completely changed you.
Yes.
And what did you hear in that voice that printed page never gave you?
I think it was a very immersive experience, and the fact that I could still be in that world even when I'm doing something else. I think that was the best part. I mean, I'm still listening to Stephen Fry's Harry Potter now and then. Like my daughter and I, we are doing it as a bedtime activity now.
Okay.
We keep going back to a Harry Potter audiobook, and I've read each book like 10 times. I'm mad like that. I think when I was in 10th grade, it was my 10th grade board exam. That is when Order of the Phoenix got released. And back then, no, you can't buy a book like that easily, the click of a button on your phone, no? So we would get one copy in a local library, and there'll be a lot of tension to sort of take that book. And my friends were very kind, saying that you have board exams, so you can take it first. No, how kind, no? Because they know that I can't finish. But then my mom was like, you'll take the book, finish the book in one day. It's okay. So an entire day from morning when I got the book till night, I was just reading Order of the Phoenix. My mom used to feed me 10th grade, 10th grade or 12th grade. I have chemistry board exam like 2 days later. So that crazy Harry Potter fan. And for me to stay in that world through an alternate medium, while staying true to the words written by the author, I think that was what was amazing. Yeah.
Because a lot of it gets missed out, all the details.
Yes.
And I was wondering whether. So how long was one book in audio format?
I think the first book was about 10 hours, and the fifth book, being the longest, was about 32 hours or something, I think. Well, it was fantastic, right? You never know, because you're cooking and you're listening, you're driving and you're listening, you're traveling and you're listening, you're at the gym and you're listening. So you don't even realize that you're consuming, but you're still consuming a book that you love, and you're able to teleport yourself to that world while staying rooted to what you're doing here. I think that was the experience for me.
Wonderful. Out of all the Tamil classics, you chose the 1,000-page epic Sivagami.
Sivagami in Sabadam, yes.
What was it about the story that made you choose it? Do you think listening to the story allows people to feel history more deeply than just reading it as a page?
I think it differs from one person to another. I don't think I can generalize and say reading is better, listening is better. But what is amazing about an audiobook is I stay true to the author. Like, I don't mince words, I don't change words. I'm not re-narrating the story. I'm reading it with modulation, with emotions,
Yeah.
which means I'm staying really true to the author.
Yeah.
That is what is amazing about audiobooks for me, because there are a lot of people who do storytelling, right? For Ponniyin Selvan, for example, a lot of people narrate the story using their own words. And sometimes we tend to add our voice, our
Yeah.
opinion,
Yeah.
our impression into
Yeah.
that. Somewhere I think I didn't want to do that. I wanted to stay true to Kalki's words. And unpopular opinion, I think Sivagami and Sabadam is a much more rounded novel than Ponniyin Selvan. Even Kalki's own son, in one of his articles, he has mentioned that Ponniyin Selvan is Kalki's magnum opus, but Sivagami and Sabadam is Kalki's masterpiece. So it's very interesting, right? Ponniyin Selvan has a lot of loose threads hanging here and there. While I still love that book, I don't want to get bashed because I'm saying Ponniyin Selvan is bad. That's not what I mean. But Sivagami and Sabadam has characters that are very, very well written. The emotions, the feelings, the situations, and there's a closure. Like the story ends very nicely. And this was, I think, second year into my whole audiobook narration, and that is why I chose Sivagami and Sabadam, because I wanted to learn how to narrate such a long book. Because when I change voices to characters, whatever voice I have for, say, a Paranjodi in chapter 1 has to stay the same till the last chapter.
Yeah.
Right? That consistency I had to learn.
Yeah.
And the consistency to record and post. That is, I think, the most challenging thing. So I used to do one episode every day. I sort of made a promise to my listener as well as myself that I would do one chapter every day.
Yeah.
I think that really shaped me as a narrator, as a content creator, to learn that consistency, to learn the art itself, get better at the craft.
Yeah.
And I used Sivagami in Sabadam for that. And then Ponniyin Selvan came much later. You might wonder, why did you choose Ponniyin Selvan later, right? But because I think Sivagami is a character that's just fantastic, right? The emotions, the character arc is just amazing. All the other characters, I would say.
Yeah.
So I think that is why I chose Sivagami and Sabadam. But to answer your second question, will people relate to the history more in the audio format? I think we are all different types of learners. If we apply Howard Gardner's multiple intelligence theory, we all have multiple intelligences. Some of us learn through listening, some of us learn through reading. For some of us, math comes naturally. Some of us have interpersonal skills. Some of us are intrapersonal. So I think it differs from one person to another. So there is no generic thing to it. But if I'm scared to pick a 1,000-page book,
Yeah.
then listening comes much more, I think, more accessible. You don't get intimidated.
Yeah. So you're talking about how people are different. What about the youth? You know, you'll never find them picking up this 1,000, like you said, that, you know, it's a. So do you think that it's a good way, audiobook is a good way to reach out to them and let them know about their culture?
Yes. I'll tell you why. Because a lot of young people cannot read Tamil. So when they were in school, Tamil was not a part of their subject list. They would have chosen second language as Hindi or Sanskrit or something else, right?
Yeah.
But their mother tongue would be Tamil. And I think as we grow older, even when they are younger compared to me, I think there is this need to connect to your roots somewhere. And when something is spoken about a lot, like Ponniyin Selvan, Kalki, I think there is a natural curiosity for people to know more about it.
Yeah.
And I can't read Tamil, and it's a 1,000-page book. How do I access it?
Yeah.
That is where audiobooks are fantastic, I would say.
I agree. And what do you do with your voice to have it sound so great? I mean, is it natural or did you have to work and train a little bit on that?
Yeah, if I listen to my very first audiobook now, I cringe, right? I just can't listen to my own initial renderings of my very first novella was Poiman Karadu by Kalki. It had, I think, 30 chapters. So I wanted to try this one chapter a day, and it'll complete in a month, no?
Oh, yeah.
So like setting a small goal and achieving it type. When I did that, back then it felt like, oh, I'm doing a fantastic job, right? And then my parents also were, my father's very critical of whatever I do. He also said, oh, it's fantastic. But now when I listen to it, it's like, how did I dare to put this out? But it also means that I've become better at my craft. So I tell myself that it's okay. You don't have to be so self-critical.
Somewhere you begin, right?
Yeah,
Somewhere you have to start.
So I think I have come a long way in terms of how I use my voice to become the different characters, and how do I narrate in a way that feels easy for the listener to access any kind of book.
Yeah.
And I keep saying this in many places, right? The audiobook narrator somewhere should become invisible. The audiobook narrator cannot have their ego, their opinion, their voice come to the forefront.
Yeah.
So I think I'm sort of trying to get better and better and better at that. So when the listener is listening to an audiobook, they experience the author's characters and it runs as a movie in their mind. And I don't come and jerk them out of that experience.
Yeah.
That is what I'm trying to get better and better at.
So you have to really think through all of this.
Yes,
and
yes,
work
it's a
on-
lot of prep work,
Yeah.
right? Because if you take Ponniyin Selvan, for example, going back to that because it's a common
Yeah.
book that people can relate to, there are almost 50 important characters in the book. And I would have to have a unique voice to each of these characters. Because when I listen to Stephen Fry's Harry Potter, no, when Dumbledore is speaking, even before he said Dumbledore, just from the way he changes his voice, I would know that it is Dumbledore speaking. That is the benchmark for me, right? So I was trying to do that in Ponniyin Selvan, and it's a lot of work. For instance, in one of the chapters, there is a scene where there are 4-5 men of the same age group talking to each other. Now, how do I differentiate my voice so that the listener doesn't feel lost as to who is talking now?
Yeah.
See, the problem with audiobook is it's a secondary activity. Nobody goes, rewinds and listen. You listen, and if you don't get it, you don't get it, you
Yeah.
move on. Whereas if you're reading, you always flip the page and go back and
Yeah,
read, right?
yeah.
So I have to ensure that I'm holding the attention of the listener, because nobody's going to stop cooking to listen to my voice. Nobody's going to like park their car on the road somewhere and then listen, oh, I'll finish this chapter and then drive. That's not going to happen, right? So that is the challenge with respect to understanding the characters, staying true to the character. For example, Nandini, I can see Nandini, Kundavai everywhere looking at me. Nandini, Kundavai, Punkurali, all of them are also in the same age group. So how do I differentiate the voice? How do I make sure that the personality, the character that Kalki has etched comes to life through my voice? So that's a lot of work,
Thinking
I
and
would say.
work,
Yeah.
So you've really maybe studied a lot of audiobooks to understand how this kind of works and
Yeah, I listen to a lot of English audiobooks because there aren't many Tamil audiobooks that I
Yeah.
can learn from. But English audiobooks have helped me tremendously. There are such good narrators, and I think in the West it's a more accessible medium. It's more popular. Like some of these authors' books, when the physical book gets released, the audiobook gets released in parallel. People wait for the audiobook to come out, and a lot of celebrities narrate audiobooks there.
Yeah.
Tom Hanks has done a book, and Meryl Streep has done a book, and they do a phenomenal job
Yeah.
with narration. So it really helps to have such examples to learn from. Yeah.
And what made you decide to dedicate a podcast to audio narration, to audiobook narration?
Because I couldn't find one. I think I was having a hangover from Harry Potter audiobooks, and I started searching for Tamil audiobooks.
Okay.
I wanted to listen to maybe a La Sara or a Pudumai Pittan or whatever books I grew up reading.
Yeah.
I couldn't find. Even the ones I found was only Ponniyin Selvan, and even there, I'm very particular about the pronunciation in Tamil. Like the r, la, na has to fall in place. And I mean, I'm sure if you go and talk to any Tamil person, they will say Tamil. Like r doesn't come naturally. And for me, to listen to a classic text with incorrect pronunciation is very
Put off.
Yeah. So I thought, okay, maybe I should start one. That's how it started.
And what is your process for creating the voice for characters? Do you have a, I mean, how do you match voices to characters? What are some of your favorite characters that you've read?
I think that is the most interesting part. I've been doing this for almost 7 years now. And I've narrated over 120 audiobooks. And every book is different, and every book will have an interesting character. For instance, in one of the more recent books that I narrated, there is an old man. He has no teeth, and he's speaking. Okay, so it's how do you speak, narrate, thinking of a character that doesn't have teeth? That modulation to come requires a lot of practice, right? And then there'll be characters that would be chewing pan and speaking, and I can't actually chew pan because then the mouth clicks will get noted by the sound engineer and they'll be like, redo it. So I can't really have a pan. So how do I do it without the mouth clicks coming? One Jayamohan's story, Peruvali, had a character that is on its deathbed and is narrating his experience of seeing Mount Kailash. He's on his deathbed and he's suffering from cancer and he's really old and feeble and his last moments are just waiting for him. So how do I give a voice to such a character while ensuring that the voice is not too feeble? Because the listener has to hear every word that the character is speaking.
If you don't mind, can you
Oh,
do
that's
something?
really, I need the text. If I have the text,
Sure,
I'm
sure,
sure I
sure.
can do it. But unless I have the text,
Yeah, it
I
won't make
sort of,
sense.
maybe some other time.
Yes.
But I think each character is interesting. Like the one I narrated yesterday was a story from the Mahabharata. And it's happening during the time of Janamejaya. And Vyasa is really old, like really old. And Vyasa is speaking. So how do I give voice to such an old man?
Deep voice, yeah.
And it should still be heard by the listener. Every word should be heard. So yeah, I think many fascinating, interesting characters. So it's one thing to give voice to a character. It's the other thing to give the emotion to the character, and then there's a slang added to it. Jayamohan's Yera Mulagam is a book that I narrated recently. It has heavy Nagarkovil slang. All the characters speak a very different Tamil slang that I'm not used to in my day-to-day
Daily,
life, right? So one, I have to figure out the voice. Two, I have to stay true to the slang. Three, I have to retain the
that's a lot of
emotion,
work.
right? So
Yeah.
it's, I mean, I think that challenge is what keeps me going and
Yeah.
makes me explore new books.
Yeah.
Same thing with Perumal Murugan's Madhuru Bagan. Have you read One Part Woman? I would highly recommend it. That book had Coimbatore slang. That too, like a village somewhere interior Kongu slang it had.
Okay.
So I actually had a couple of people from that place record a few dialogues and send it to me and practice because I had to stay true to that
Yes.
slang. So I mean, I absolutely have fun doing this.
Very cool, and you're growing also every time you
Yes,
create
yes,
new
yes.
voices. But my question is that you manage men's character also.
Yeah, I
very well.
manage men's characters better.
Yeah.
I don't know how. It's very strange how your real character in real life is very different from the characters you play through your voice, right? I hardly cry in my real life, but I cry so well in audio.
Ah,
So people will think that I'm really crying, but I would only be, voice acting.
okay.
But I cannot laugh. I laugh a lot in my real life, but I cannot laugh
Pretend.
easily
Yeah.
while recording. So it's
Yeah.
very strange how
Yeah.
how the real character me becomes a different character
Yeah.
inside the studio booth.
So do you think it's a lot like acting, in movies, except that you're behind the scene and you're doing the voice?
It is a lot of voice acting than physical acting.
Yeah.
I think if I can equate it, I mean, I can't even equate it to dubbing because in dubbing also you have a visual reference and you have to stay true to that reference. Here there is no reference. Like you sort of ensure that
Innovate.
the author's words come alive, but you stay true to the author. That is, I think, the biggest challenge.
Yeah. And for your audiobook reading, what do you enjoy doing more, like a fiction or non-fiction? And what is more difficult?
I love fiction. I'm very partial to fiction. I read a lot of fiction. I listen to a lot of fiction, and I love narrating fiction because that is where the characters and the emotions that cannot be equaled in, I think, non-fiction.
Plus, you're a big Harry Potter fan.
Yeah. I think growing up also I've read a lot of fiction in Tamil also.
Okay.
So I'm like extremely partial to fiction.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about the speed? So how do you decide on the pace? Because I've read some audiobooks, and some books are at faster speed than others. So how do you do that?
I like how you said I read audiobooks. Huh? It's phenomenal that you use that word.
Yes.
Because in a way it is reading. Some people say, oh, it's not reading, but it is reading. Thank you for using that word. So the pace is not dependent on me. The pace is dependent on the story. And throughout the story also I can't use the same pace.
No, but there's no standard or something.
No.
This.
The script, I think, decides and demands the pace. You were asking about non-fiction, right? I think the challenge with non-fiction is I still remember the very first non-fiction book I narrated. I thought, oh, it's going to be so easy, because there's no change of voice, no emotion. I just have to sort of,
Yeah.
and this was the miracle morning, and my God, it was so boring for me only, to narrate it.
Yeah.
So I have to ensure that it doesn't sound boring to the listener.
Okay.
Otherwise, I don't do justice to it. So I
Yeah.
can't be too fast. I can't be too slow. I have to pause in the right places for
Sure.
the listener to understand what the author is trying to convey. So non-fiction was a different challenge altogether. Thankfully, I've not done too much non-fiction. I mean, it is interesting to do maybe a biography or self-help books, though I don't want to do. Biography, history, such non-fiction books are very, very interesting. Yeah.
What are some of the enjoyable audiobooks that you have read besides the Harry Potter? And are some books easier to read aloud, meaning the language is fluid, enjoyable? Who are the authors? And what are some more difficult ones to read?
Some books are very, very challenging.
Yeah.
And there is this author, Gokul Seshadri, and he releases one book every year, okay? And
Okay.
this is a very popular series on Storytel.
Okay.
We are releasing the 9th book in that series, hopefully sometime now. And it's an absolutely fantastic experience to narrate his books. See, Tamil has a lot of the pronunciation itself comes from different parts of your mouth. If you look at English, it is mostly from the front part of your mouth.
Yeah.
If you speak English, um, it's quite easy to do it. But Tamil, when you say r, the tongue goes back. When you say l, the tongue touches the upper palate. So it's a lot of physical activity
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
I mean, this might sound very interesting or weird, but it's sometimes you narrate from your mouth, sometimes you narrate from your throat, sometimes you narrate from your chest, sometimes you narrate from your stomach,
Wow.
sometimes you have to narrate from your brain. I don't know if it makes sense, but it is very, very different
and
for
complicated.
different books.
Okay.
Like if I have to come back to the Gokul Seshadri example, his Tamil is so good that I feel like my blood sugar has gone down after I finish a session. It is that exhausting. I generally, when I finish a book, I send him a voice note saying, you know what, you're just doing this thing to me where I fall sick after narrating a book. Very unfair like that. I send him voice notes, but it is like that in the sense it exhausts your energy in multiple ways. Sometimes it's the physical energy and sometimes it's the mental energy. For example, if I look at some of these really intense books where, like, let's go back to Ye Ramulagam. Ye Ramulagam is a book which was the inspiration for director Bala's Naan Kadavul. It's a very intense experience. It talks about the life of beggars, right? And sometimes when I come out of the studio booth, I cannot walk. Mentally, I would be so drained. Emotionally, to be a character that experiences so much pain. So it's very different from one book to another. And there are these books which are, I don't know if these authors had an idea that, oh, someday this will become an audio book. Let me write something that is very audio in the book itself. I'll give you two examples. One is Sujata's is a book where the character, there's a multiple personality hallucination type of book. No spoilers, but the same character will become multiple characters while speaking. And the only way it can be communicated is by the change of voice. So I don't know how Sujata, I don't know if he thought of this as, oh, someday, I mean, knowing him and the kind of science fiction books he has written, maybe he knew someday somebody will be doing audiobooks and this will be like a super challenge for the audiobook narrator, right? And it was such fun to do that book. I had to be 100% there to get the correct voice out. Otherwise, it'll confuse the listener like crazy. And then there was this Jayamohan's short story called Devi, where the same person acts as three characters on stage.
Okay.
And the only way she does it is by changing her voice. Now, when I read it, you don't have to worry too much. No, you in your mind, maybe the voice will come, the voice won't come. You will know the story and you will go out of it. But when you listen to the audiobook, it is the narrator who has to bring about the difference in those three voices and ensure that the listener understands the story.
And connects with it.
Yeah, so I think it's a lot of. I mean, I make it
lot
sound
of
like
fun.
very
But also looks like because I've had a chat with a lot of authors too, And it just seems like you yourself are immersed into the character as if
Yes.
you're the author yourself, and
I mean, I'm not the author, but
No, I'm just
Gokul
saying that.
Seshadri calls me a co-creator. I mean, he's very magnanimous to use that word because I still feel that if not for the authors, I can never be doing this, right?
Yeah.
But he has been very kind to call me a co-creator because he says that you are taking my creation to a different plane,
Yeah.
to a different medium,
An
without
experience.
diluting what I have written.
Absolutely. So does it help talking to the authors?
Some authors are they like talking and understanding the creative process. Some authors give you inputs, but not all the authors are that.
Helpful.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so what awkward moment or mistake, whether mechanical or self-inflicted, or in exchange with an author, did you experience as an audiobook narrator that you don't believe you'll ever forget?
When I started doing audiobooks, I only did what was on public domain. So most of these authors were not around. So I had this thing like the author's never going to listen, right? But then after we started getting rights from authors, and then I realized, oh my God, now this
Yeah.
author's going to listen, and
Yeah.
that's like always writing an exam and waiting for results. Even now, like the latest Gokul say, I've narrated 10 books of Gokul Seshadri, but he said, oh, send me this one chapter. I want to listen to it. Till he gets back, I'd be like, oh God, oh God, oh God, I hope I did well. So I think that is always there. But self-inflicted, that's quite a lot. Sometimes I would forget to press record and I would be narrating.
Oh.
And then I'll realize the audio is not there. But one very helpful feedback was from a listener.
Okay.
This was in my initial days of narration. He said, do not approach audiobook narration as public speaking. You're not doing public speaking. You are doing one-on-one storytelling. And I think that changed the way I approach narration. And I'm still getting better and better at what he mentioned.
Yeah.
Because,
Makes sense.
yeah,
actually.
I might have millions of listeners, right? But it is still one person listening to it at one point on his
Yeah.
or her headphones.
Yeah. So most of us think that expressive narration means being dramatic, but you figured out something very opposite. That a singer-song voice makes listeners drift away.
Yes.
What was that all about?
So I think the important thing to understand here is an audiobook is a long format content. Suppose I start listening to an audiobook, I might not close in 10-15 minutes. I might end up listening to it for like an hour or so, which means an ear fatigue would set in. We have the attention span of a goldfish today, and the average view duration of reels, they say 2 seconds, 3 seconds. And how do I hold the attention of somebody for 1 hour, 2 hours? That is when I figured that if I keep doing the same na 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 na, then the listener's brain is going to zone out. So the idea there is this sentence has this meaning, and that meaning has to be conveyed to the listener. So
Yeah.
what is the modulation that is required for that sentence? That is the approach. If I don't do that, then it will end up being this whole monotonous. So when we tend to read out from a script, normally somebody picks up a script and reads, you will notice that they will have that sing-song tone.
Yeah.
Because that's how we are used to reading. That has to be avoided at all costs, is what I learned very early in my narration, thanks to a lot of inspiration from these Western narrators who've done a phenomenal job. There is Marin Ireland, who's a fantastic narrator. I love her narration. And then there is Julia Whelan and so many narrators, right? They do this. They don't have that whole sing-song thing. My brain just does not zone out. They have the knack to pull your attention back into the story, and that cannot happen if you have the sing-song
Yeah.
tone. Yeah.
I'm just wondering whether you think the sing-song thing would work for little children?
In some sense. So when I do Chittukuruvi podcast, for instance, I do change my tone, but I don't do the same na 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 na. I change the tone to imply that I'm talking to a child, so that I sort of slow down a little bit and emphasize a word a little bit stronger than I would do for an adult. எல்லா குழந்தைங்களுக்கும் என்னோட வணக்கம், something like that, right? So there is this chirpiness that you bring to your voice when you narrate to a child. But there also I tend to avoid the sing song as much as possible, because each sentence there again has a meaning that has to be conveyed to a child. And having worked with children for a very long term, I know that their attention span is getting worse and worse. So how do I hold the attention? So sometimes I would just pause and ask a question. And very interestingly, I've heard feedback from parents say that children actually answer and they think I'm listening to their answer, because I would ask a question, then I would give a small pause in the audio itself. Children answer, and then I would say "Sabash" or something like that, and children think that I heard
So
their
cute.
response.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think such things I do in children's podcast that makes it more accessible to children.
Yeah. And do you think, I mean, when you hear feedbacks, like you told me someone from Dubai and someone from. So, have you also, do you think that audiobooks are also very helpful for neurodivergent children because they are unable to read and
Yes.
hold the attention span for so long?
Yes, I think that listening to stories comes naturally to neurodivergent children, and in Jula also I do have a couple of neurodivergent children who are a part of the classroom, and the best way to calm them down is to either narrate a story or sing a song.
Yeah.
So yes, definitely, there's no two way about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what are some of the joys and challenges to you personally as an audiobook narrator?
I mean, joy is, I mean, I think I've said a lot. I think even the challenges, not to sound too pretentious, but even the challenges are joyful after the challenges are crossed. Like, whatever would be a challenge to begin with, like, do a different slang or find the right voice for a certain character. All that is a challenge, but once you sort of do it, no,
Yeah.
there is a joy that comes. I think that is phenomenal. Of course, challenges are to maintain the voice tone. That's a huge challenge. Like if I start, say, a 12-hour audiobook recording, obviously I can't finish it in like 2-3 days, no?
Yeah.
So I have to maintain the same tone from the first chapter to the last chapter. That's a huge challenge. So the physical tonality, maintaining that, and then consistency of the character voices, those are very challenging, I must say. Yeah.
And what does your family think about your audiobooks? Your daughter, your parents, husband?
So when I started audiobooks, when I started my Kadai Osai podcast, I was very sure that my parents would listen to it because they're always very curious about new things that I attempt. I was very sure my husband's not going to listen to it because, I mean, day in and day out he's listening to my voice. Why would he listen to it again as an audiobook? Back then my daughter was very young, and my in-laws, my mother-in-law became a part of my team. Like she used to do QC. So after I record and edit, she will listen to it to see if there are any mistakes. So she was an integral part of the team itself. But I think when I started doing more books, and when there was a book that my husband really wanted to read, and he thought, okay, maybe I'll try listening to her. Now he's become my biggest fan, I would say, and I'm so grateful for that.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So my father has always been this critic.
Yes. I think all fathers.
Yeah, no. So he's like, either be perfect or don't do, right? It's like that growing up. And so to get him say, oh, this is done well, you've done this well, is like the biggest accomplishment. I think to have my father and husband listen and say, okay, has been a very big accomplishment, I would say.
Nice. I mean, they're biggest critic, but when they are in public, they talk about you with such pride, which
Yes,
is
that is
amazing.
true. Yes, yes. But I think we also need such critics
Yeah,
who
to
are at an
improvise.
arm's length so that you get better at your craft.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you don't have to become stagnant and think that, oh, I'm so good.
Yeah.
I think that is important.
And what's your most favorite project that you worked on and why?
Oh, that's such a difficult question. I cannot talk about one project. How do I don't know.
Okay.
Very difficult.
Okay. Also, what's something you wish audiobook listeners knew about what you do? And what was the most unexpected thing about narrating audiobooks that you didn't foresee going
Okay,
in?
I think lot of listeners do not know the behind the scenes stuff because
Yeah.
this is just an audio medium. You don't get a chance to see who the listener is. Like for
Yeah.
the longest time, people did not know how I would look because I was not there out on social media
Yeah.
much. So for them to figure out, oh, this is the face behind that voice, I think that is a very interesting thing. And I wish they knew that this is an entirely different art form by itself. This is not dubbing. This is not voiceover.
Yeah.
This is not voice acting also. This is audiobook narration. I think that is what I would like the listeners to know, that this is an entirely different new art/craft by itself. And then they would be able to appreciate the nuances
Yeah.
that the artist brings to that art form. I think
Yeah.
that is what I would like them to know. But one interesting experience I would say is there is this story called Purani that I narrated long back. Now, if I listen to it, it's bad. But back then, what happened was there was this one old woman character in that story that was almost on her deathbed, and she was reminiscing her life while in her deathbed. So everything is running in her mind. She's hallucinating, she's going in and out, and a very interesting story by Lasara. And I narrated the entire story. Huh? By the way, I think the final output was about an hour or so. I narrated the entire story. I finished editing. Back then, I used to narrate, I used to edit, I used to do QC till I had help from people. And I did the entire editing and did the QC. I listened to it, and then I was just not convinced with this old lady's voice. So I said, okay, I don't want to release this. Let me hold on to this for a while. And then I listened to it a couple of days later. I was still not convinced. Then I decided, okay, let me do it one more time. And I recorded the entire thing again, listened to it, and was not convinced. I sent a sample to my father and said, do you feel Purani Ata in that voice? He said, no. And I was like, okay, what do I do? So I sort of decided that I'll move on to the next story. I'll keep this on hold. Then one fine morning, I had severe cold, cough. And I got up, I brushed, and then I called out to my husband. When I heard my own voice, I felt, oh my God, this is Purani Ata's voice.
Okay.
So I actually sat and recorded with a cough, cold voice, just the characters of the Purani Ata, just the dialogues. In fact, what happened was towards the end of my recording, my voice became better. So I was trying to do and make it sound like how it was in the beginning. And then I took the old recording, cut out all of Purani Ata's dialogues, inserted this horrible voice, cold cough voice, and then I listened and I was like, wow.
Nice. Do you have any rituals you practice while you're recording an audiobook, like certain foods you eat or stay away from? How do you take care of your voice?
All that I did in the beginning thinking that it would help. But now, I mean, I can't not eat ice cream. Come on. So, no.
No breathing, nothing.
No.
Okay.
I used to do it and then I realized, okay.
So do you think audiobooks will one day replace reading?
No.
Why?
I think reading is reading. And different parts of your brain get activated when you read versus listen. And I don't think it's going to replace anything. Like each of these would be independent mediums. But I would say audiobook is the closest to reading. And in fact, quite a few of my listeners started listening and then became readers. They would go with, I've had emails where people say, I bought the book, I have the book in my hand, I listened to your voice, I learned to read Tamil through that. And then they started reading. So it's, yeah, and one cannot expect all the books that are published in Tamil to become audio.
Yeah.
I mean, how many people are needed to do something like that? Every year, the number of books that get published versus the number of books that are created into audio, it is insignificant. The ratio is insignificant. So, no.
There's a lot to keep in mind when we are presenting to the audience, and I've always found that this idea that you're not there for yourself, but you're there to serve people, especially what you're doing with your audiobooks. So any tip or advice to people who need to work on their voices?
Very interestingly, once I started podcasting and narrating audiobooks, I also teach podcasting in a couple of colleges. What I realized was by being an audiobook narrator, by being a podcaster, I've become a better communicator. I'm able to use my voice to my advantage even in a real life conversation. For instance, if I'm in a classroom, because I know that listening to an audiobook or a podcast is a secondary activity, attention spans are so low, I know how to hold the attention, that I use in my classroom. Because students are going to have very limited attention span. They are going to zone out. They're going to think about random things. So how do I use my voice? How do I use the storytelling techniques that I learned while I speak in front of a classroom to hold their attention? I think that has been a fantastic learning experience to apply the skill from one area into a completely different area. I think that is what people can learn by becoming podcasters or storytellers, by using their voice to communicate better. Now, even when I communicate to my daughter, for instance, when I communicate difficult things with people, I think it comes in handy.
Yeah, so it's enhanced your personal skills too.
Yeah, communication. I think it has made me a better communicator. I mean, I don't know if my family would agree to that, but I would like to think that.
Yeah. Fantastic. I've loved your energy and spirit here. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you
This
so
was a
much for the
wonderful-
amazing questions. I think you've done such good research and I had such fun talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stories don't just preserve language, they preserve memory, culture, and connection. In a world moving fast, Deepika Arun chose to slow it down, one story at a time, nurturing young minds, reviving Tamil literature through audio. We will be back with another conversation that deserves to be heard.